Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Steve Stockton from Missing Persons Mysteries. What a legend to find his way into the Fox Den tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Starfox Radio. This is going to be an epic one. Yet please, I have been sleeping for so long and really need to feed. Absolutely delicious. And thank you, Mr. Stockton, for releasing my shackles and setting me free so that once again, the Midnight Society and Missing Persons Mysteries can venture off into the darkness.
Blow, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beasts reborn, fury rise, health ignites, burdens raise, endless nights.
I looked into the eyes of this Dogman. There was nothing. This thing was an apex predator.
Milk road, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beasts reborn,
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back once again to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. This is the home and the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. And again, we sit by the late night fire to burn the timber and read a few chapters out of the Midnight Society book in an attempt to figure out what is occurring with strange sightings, missing people, and all kinds of unknown activity globally. We have the legendary, yes, he doesn't even need my introduction. You will know as soon as you hear his voice, but I'm going to, of course, introduce him. Steve Stockton from among the missing persons mysteries, and the list goes on. He is a legend and he is here with us tonight. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. With an introduction like that, I wish I had a better show for you.
You- Just being here, my friend, is always awesome. You are one of my
Yeah,
favorite
it's
people.
always a pleasure and an honor to be here, Star Fox.
Well, I thank you right back. What have you been up to? Would you like to tell the audience if you've been doing anything interesting inside, outside of cryptids?
Apart from everything that I do on YouTube and my radio show and the books and everything, I became a father of a son, Holden Chandler Stockton. He turned 2 months old on the 5th of November. So that's I'm preoccupied with that. I'm just obsessed with him. He's going to be my little mini me. He's already moving right along. He can already say hi, and he can stick his tongue out and hold his head up, and he loves the sound of my voice. And I've had people say that it's going to be awesome growing up with you for a dad and a storyteller. So I'm thinking that'll rub off on my dad. Read to me when I was a kid, so I'm hoping that he'll come by it honestly.
That is absolutely awesome. And just to make you chuckle, Steve, because I've had friends before that are like, dude, you got to get him on your show more. I love that guy's voice. And it's like, yeah, everyone loves his voice. And on a funny note, imagine just with your legendary voice trying to have a comedic conversation. Everyone's going to stop for a second because it's legendary. And then you're going to be like, dude, that's not even legendary what I'm trying to say, you know?
Yeah. Oh, you ought to hear my blooper reel, and it's legendary, but in a different way.
Yeah, all editors, including yourself, myself, anybody out there knows how that rolls. I mean, slurring words. And that's why I'm a big fan of not necessarily going live and being able to correct vocabulary. And if I can't enunciate words, because if I'm live and I can't say a word, there goes the
Yeah.
blank screen for a second. I got to learn how to speak.
Yeah, and especially some of these Native American names of places and things like that, or just far away that have kind of strange names and things, and I butcher those all the time. I'll try to go online and find out how to say it, but like you said, if I'm doing something live, if I'm doing a live reading or a live stream or something, I butcher people's name in the chat. But that's just part of the fun.
Right. Especially with the scientific names. I've gotten much better, but there's still names where you're like, what the heck? I swear these scientists purposely made this word nearly impossible to pronunciate so they can be the only ones to
Yeah.
be able to say it properly.
Exactly, and I can attest to that as a fact. My dad was a scientist out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he would explain something to me, and I'd be like, "Can you repeat that in English?"
Yes, because I am not a scientist, but when I used to work with a sports doctor and he basically, I guess, would be the scientist of the body, yeah, he would have to really dim it down sometimes when he'd be speaking to people because I'd be like, dude, I don't think these people are totally understanding what you're saying. You got to make it a little bit more comprehensible.
Yeah, I get you. In another lifetime, I had a medical legal background. I worked for a law firm that did personal injury, products liability, and the other thing. I can't remember what the other thing was. Anyway, did that, and then I also worked for a medical management company, so I had to learn a lot of medical terms. And I finished my pre-law at the University of Tennessee, so I knew I'd taken Latin and all that, and knew a lot of the legalese, but unless you use it every day and stuff, and I think they do that like the scientists, they do it purposely to keep just the average person, the layman, in the dark about what they're talking about. They speak their
Yeah.
own language.
It's so true. And then hilariously enough, I'm watching a great video the other night and I understand, okay, they're naming things that apparently have had the same names since you and I have grown up, but then they're naming off all these extinct animals, and this guy's just ripping off these terms, and I'm like, dude, I can visually see what he's mentioning right now, but what the heck? How is he pronunciating these words? And are these even real words?
Yeah, exactly. And if you've learned the Latin and the Greek, you can pretty much figure out the meaning and the pronunciation of everything. But sometimes I miss the mark on that. I'll think it's this way and it's the other. Like certain words that'll throw you off, like coelacanth. Just looking at that one, it does not look like it'd be pronounced that way.
None of those do, my friend. Cynocephali, Amphicenoidae, Dinopithecus. Like, you're like, wait a
Yeah.
second. How can I even? I can say these words, but I misspell them numerous times and still have to look up the proper enunciation. And half of the time, my spell
Yeah.
correcting still doesn't even recognize it. So,
Yeah, but that's a good thing though. If you mispronounce a word, I had a professor in college taught me that very important lesson. There was somebody doing an oral report and he mispronounced some words, and the other students were laughing at him. And the professor got up and said, "Don't you laugh at him." He said he learned those words through reading. He knows the words, he's used them in the proper context. He just doesn't know how to say them because he's read them. He said, "Don't ever make fun of anybody for educating themselves," and that has stuck with me since 1980s.
it's beautiful stuff right there. And that's probably some of the realest, truest talk I've heard of. And tonight, you have some awesome stuff you'd like to dive into, but you had also tapped on Ding Ding Ding, Tennessee. And I have something that kind of ties into that. And it's totally up to you, my friend. I didn't know if you wanted to take the mic and start heading in the direction you would like to, or if you'd like me to hopefully blow your mind and the audience's
Blow
mind.
my mind, and I'll follow your lead. And if you've got something in Tennessee, I'd love to hear it. Born and raised in East Tennessee, lived there for 40 years, but I've lived all over. I'm kind of a citizen of the world. Went from Tennessee to Florida to Las Vegas to Portland, Oregon to Washington State, briefly back to Oregon, then back to the high desert, New Mexico, and now I'm in Massachusetts. So who knows where I'll end up? I've actually been looking at some land in Tennessee, close to the land between the lakes area. So I may have some boots on the ground reports coming up.
Wow, that is legendary. And you're right up near me. I'm in Maine, as everybody knows. You know, we're nice New Englanders, pretty close to Canada. That's why I'm a big hockey guy. So when everyone's like, "What, you watch hockey?" It's like, "Yeah, of course, A. I'm like basically Canadian, right?" So,
There you go.
also, you being down in Tennessee, before I got a chance to ever meet you, when I would hear you talking, because I didn't even put a face to you, I was just seeing your videos, and I don't believe you would show your face unless you went live, which I saw you afterwards. But when I first saw your stuff, it was just you covering cases in your voice. So, me being creative in my head, I just pictured this legendary woodsman pretty much like telling these true encounters of people that were missing because I was verifying it. And then I get a chance to meet you and I saw some of the images of where you were and out there, boots on the ground. I'm like, dude, it literally fits into the personification that I had fixed in my brain even before I ever met this guy. So I thought that was pretty
Yeah,
funny.
I've cleaned up a lot since I got married, but I used to have like the ZZ Top beard and the hat and the long hair and everything. One of the nicknames, the sobriquet that my audience put on me was the Hillbilly Wizard. Now, I didn't make that up; they gave it to me. I don't know about that, but with the hat and everything, I did have kind of a Gandalf appearance there, I guess, but a backwoods Gandalf.
It's funny you say that because when it comes to like friends giving you nicknames, you can't really pick them or choose them. You got to deal with them. But if it's people that are trolling you, you're like, yeah, get that out of here, like for
Yeah,
sure. But all right, so obviously, like you said, being down in Tennessee, you've had to have heard about the Ozark Howler. And to my audience, most people out there are gonna be aware of that topic as well. If you'd like to really dive into it, you can search for it. I believe it's been embellished a ton now and has all kinds of mixed in aspects to it. But what I'm going to touch base on right now is from Forrest Galanti. I again advise anyone to check him out. He is one of my favorite animal people out there. He knows a ton. He's always out helping people, traveling around. Great guy. Check him out on YouTube. But either way, he has some amazing information and it really ties into how I stress to people we just got to be logical sometimes, okay? Because there are logical explanations for things. And well, the Ozark Howler, strange human-like howls and howling throughout the whole entire area. Okay, well, red wolves are a diminishing species, okay? And there are sadly only around 20 of them recognized in the wild. And any sort of canine, especially wolves, when they dwindle in numbers, howl at each other, okay, to communicate. Also, the first supposed Ozark howler that was unalived, that the skull and some of the other parts were left behind from this guy's supposed grandfather, Forrest was able to look at it. Of course, it's a red wolf. Interesting. Also, in the area, he talked to some elderly people that had family members that used to do moonshining during Prohibition times. And because people were scared of the strange howls and such, these moonshiners would purposely do that to make people that were coming into the area be intimidated and think the Ozark Howler was there. And this one gentleman was howling how his grandfather had showed him and others. And it sounded just like some of these strange howls that seem human canine like. So interesting. They would also do that to communicate with other moonshiners. Hey, we got trouble coming. And they would
yeah,
set up these places that they would brew this in caves and such. And they would even go as far as to have buckets and ropes and basically homemade makeshift machinery that would make these creepy howling raging monster. And again, they were showing and displaying this. So I just always try to stress to people that when it comes to things out of the ordinary, I'm not saying things like that don't occur and aren't out of the ordinary, but right there is just as much science and fact as there really needs to be about a topic. Yet for some reason, no one wants to hear that and wants to overlook that, except Forrest Galanti is a scientist, and so is his team. And everything I just read is scientific evidence that anyone out there can verify themselves. It's just interesting why we overlook that. And I just wanted to know your thoughts.
yeah. And I've heard those tales on my dad's side of the family. Now he's from Middle Tennessee, over on the Cumberland Plateau in the Fentress County, Jamestown area. Had some people back in the family, not close relations, but relations nonetheless, that were moonshiners. And they would do things like that. They would make up stories. One guy had a story about a headless woman that he had encountered in the woods, which I don't think he really did. I think that was just to keep people away from this still. Another guy I knew up near the Smokies that was a moonshiner back in the day, he talked about he would uh, had a story going that there was a rabid dog in the area, and he had an old wicker basket or something with a sheet set up over it, where he could pull a rope and make this thing like look like it was running through the brush and things like that. So there are some things like that. But when it comes to something like the Ozark Howler in particular, and the thing that gets me about that one, depending on who you talk to about it, sometimes it's described as a cat-like creature, but yet it's got the dogman-like head, based on some of the reports I've heard. And, it's nocturnal, elusive, potentially aggressive. But the similarities to dogman and the bipedalism, it's described as being upright on its hind legs, and despite its sometimes feline appearance, most of the descriptions of it emphasize its canine-like head and teeth. So that's kind of weird. Is it a shapeshifter? Is it, something out of Native American folklore? But the feline versus canine thing kind of got me because there's big cat stories all over the southern Appalachians. The Black Panthers, or a painter cat was what they call it in southern Appalachia, and they're not indigenous to that region yet. There's been people that have seen them and encountered them. So if you can have giant cats in there, why can you not have a cat man and a dog man, or something that's both? But Ozarks is a special place. There's just I've got a friend down there. High 50 Mike, if you're listening. He's a sheriff's deputy in the Ozarks, and boy, he's got some stories to tell. Some of the strange things he's encountered out there. But it's one of those where, is it a genuine cryptid, or if is it just a piece of folklore from Native American times, or maybe a misidentification of known animals? That's, kind of the debunkers kind of point that out. But I don't know. There's been too many sightings and too much empirical evidence of something out there that's not known, that's neither a big cat nor anything else that we're familiar with.
That is so beautifully spoken right there. And see, like being a person of science, I sit like on both sides like that because I logically approach it and I'm like, all right, well, a lot of that stuff makes sense. But then when you state some of the things you just stated too, all right. Well, that doesn't really sound like a red wolf. A lot of people don't
Yeah,
realize there are wolves with manes. I do encourage people to check that out, and also hyenas aren't related to wolves or canines or felines, and they look similar-ish. And when you do talk about the Black Panthers and stuff, oh yeah, I don't necessarily think if it's a quote unquote panther, I think it's a jaguar, more or less because I believe can't remember what I was watching, but mountain lions have never been found to have that gene to be able to become black like that. But jaguars,
yeah,
every other generation or every few generations has that pigment where it occurs. And it's one of the only known large cats that has that occur. And there's a lot of scientists that believe no different than any other animal. They've just made their way up from South America because very
yeah,
easily able to. And also, not even that though, there was points in times where people were allowed to own exotic pets, okay? People don't realize that, and I don't know the exact dates, but there was a ton of people that used to walk around with like tigers on leashes in Hollywood, and I'm like, yo, is this real life? Yeah, it was real life. And you had to get rid of these things, but they didn't really tell you what you had to do. They just said you can't own these. Okay, so obviously there's going to be a ton of rich people that thought black jaguars that they would be beautiful with their sleek fur and such. So yes, they would obviously purchase those and then, have let those go as well. And as long as something has a healthy breeding population, then people don't realize how much something can adapt. Okay, like I mean, whether it's a large cat, a hyena, it's very easy to adapt to things, and especially for predators that if you're taking them out of an area like a jaguar, okay? It's
Yeah,
what, yeah, coming from South America, where it's dealing with what, large crocodiles and all kinds of other pretty gnarly stuff. And then you put it up in Tennessee or areas up here, it doesn't really have necessarily a predator besides humans to deal with. So, same thing with like hyenas, right? If you were to take spotted hyenas out of Africa, where they're dealing with something that wants to unalive you, no matter wherever you go, everything is eating everything. And then you put them in, say, like Arizona, Texas, California. Well, people don't realize Africa gets really cold at night too. So now, if you put them in an area where they don't really have predators to deal with, same thing, and they have a healthy population to reproduce, they're going to. I mean, it's no different than in the Everglades with the issues with what are they, the pythons that have been not
yeah.
necessarily native to the area that have reproduced. So it's really interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, people turn them loose. And of course, there's the urban legend of the alligators in the sewers in New York City, where people would go on vacation down south, bring back these baby alligators. So maybe the kids had them, and then they start getting big. It's too big to fit in the bathtub. What are we going to do? Well, we flush it down the toilet or put it in the sewer. Now that's kind of been debunked because it gets too cold, I think, in New York. But then again, sewer system, it's underground. It's probably 52 degrees or so year round down there. It's possible they could exist. Anything's possible. So like and you're talking about the science side of it. That's kind of I'm right in the middle like that. My mom's side of the family, they were from the Cades Cove area, the Great Smokies, and very, very superstitious. My grandmother was a granny witch, Appalachian granny witch, and believed in all that stuff. They did seances and table tappings, and she read cards and tea leaves and all this. And my dad's side of the family, even though he was from humble beginnings, he got out, went to college, and became later on a scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So then there I was, the perfect blend of science and superstition.
That's really the way to approach it, though, right there, because then you have a healthy mix of
Yeah,
both. Because I've met some unbelievable scientists that are part of my team and friends of mine that have beautifully open minds, but then I've listened to
yeah,
other people that I haven't had a chance to speak to directly that are scientists, whether it was in, medical fields or such or whatever, and they didn't really seem to care about anyone's outside information. They already had
yeah,
their set perspective, which is cool. I mean, I guess, but it's also, like you said, really important to be able to step inside and outside the box and be like, all right, I think this could be occurring, and I feel confident talking about that, prehistoric animals that could still be existing now, etc. But then if someone's, saying, hey, this thing looks like it was manifested, etc., it is important to be able to have others that, like I said it off to, that specialize in that topic, because I don't feel like I have proper information on that. I'm aware of it, but like you said, there's so much more to what occurs. And for example, like our occult team, I'm super spiritual, but I'm not like religious, so I don't know about that type of information until it's informed to me by people that specialize in biblical historical aspects, the occult, etc. Like I said, I just try to be super nice to people, the earth, animals, people that want to hate on me, sure, yeah, he's a tree hugger, whatever, dude. Yes, okay, sure. I just try to, like I said, be a good person and treat people and earth just with love, man. So whatever, dude. If people want to, hate on me for that, that's cool. But either way, what I'm trying to get at from that, statement is they would really introduce me to a lot of interesting topics. So when it comes to, like, say, werewolves and things, that would fall, and according to them, really into the occult, of the manifestations and such. And I don't specialize in that, but when I dive into looking at, the occult occurrences in the past with like the SS and Auska Castle and over 13,000 occult books being found with the Dirty Stash and Heinrich Himmler and all that stuff. And then these people saying in these areas they're seeing winged entities that look like the Jersey Devil. They're able to manifest these strange hellhound werewolf looking things. Super interesting like that. So that's why it's important to look at it from every aspect, but then you have the side that I feel confident in with the Dinopithecus, the human-sized baboon, yellow baboons, cave hyenas, the short-faced cave bear, dire wolves, and all these things that either still exist in sparse numbers or did exist. I feel really confident, speaking about that and like the cynocephali and stuff. But to me,
yeah.
those are the dog man. Those aren't werewolves or skinwalkers and such. Like skinwalkers and werewolves are similar in the aspect of what needs to be done to become them, but there are differences. Like a skinwalker never becomes a supposed full-fledged raging werewolf. Whereas in some of the Nordic lore and things like that, you're doing some of the similar things, but you're now summoning things that could potentially be demonic. But then you have, like we were saying, the potential physical aspects where the Cynocephali are trading with Alexander the Great. He's fighting with them, and you have all these other cultures like the Aztecs depicting them and such. So it all falls under that category of Dogman and werewolves, and I'm guilty of interchanging those words too. But there really is like a big difference about all that. And I wanted to, just toss you the mic again and let you indulge in some of that too, my friend.
Yeah, you make some interesting points there. And like my dad, he was a man of science, like I said, but he would say that there's things that he didn't understand. He had had paranormal experiences. He had, saw UFOs, saw some sort of cryptids, things that he couldn't explain. And he said even in the laboratory, under extreme controlled conditions, sometimes things would just happen that weren't supposed to happen. He said they saw it, they observed it happen, it did happen, but they couldn't do it again. A reproducible result. He said there's sometimes things that just happen outside the bounds of science and nature. That's he said those are our laws that we've constructed to measure these things, but sometimes it just does what it wants to do. And talked about the religious aspect of that. My late older brother was an evangelical pastor, and the way he explained all that, he said everything that we know of as the natural, if you believe in the Bible and that sort of thing, it was spoken forth out of the supernatural. He said, and those are God's laws, and that's what we consider natural or man's laws. So there's going to be things that doesn't make any sense to us, but God can do whatever He wants to do. So there you go. That's the best explanation of that type of paranormal stuff that I've ever heard. But yeah, you talked about going back to historical times, ancient Greece and Rome, the Cynocephali. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not. They talked about a race of dog-headed people that was said to inhabit certain areas over there, found in their travel logs, their bestiaries, barbaric, sometimes cannibalistic. And then the ancient Egyptians, they have several deities, not just Anubis, but that's probably the most known, either canine or, like you said, jackal-like creature. And then, while not necessarily directly related to Dogman, I think that illustrates the association of canines with the supernatural and the otherworldly. And then you get into medieval times. That's where a lot of your werewolf legends come in, things like that. But and on into the Native American folklore and things. But that's what I appreciate about these, and it makes it more confusing. But you blur the lines between a dogman and a werewolf and these other things, but it's all kind of the same thing. I think it's all connected, brother. It's there. It's everything in the paranormal. I think has some kind of connection, either a straight line or a dotted line.
Again, beautifully spoken. And yeah, there is just so much going on. And I feel like I'm so deep into it as a journalist now that when they're like, go down the rabbit hole, man, I'm so far down the rabbit hole. Every time I move something, I feel like somebody like looking for ancient fossils, some successful paleontologist. I just dust off something and you're like, oh crap, this has some credibility right here. So it's hard at first, like you said, once you get through those first couple layers, but then as you progress down, yeah, I feel like I'm so far down into it that I'm just finding amazing stuff. And you also had mentioned something really interesting earlier before we started recording. And when I was speaking to Jessica Jones about this too, I think it's something that really ties in just to general as to how we're sometimes unaware of things and how we just tie everything into one, like you said, but it could be one, like Dogman, Werewolf, Cynocephaly. Well, there's a lot of credence out there for some really great minds. That same thing with Sasquatch and Bigfoot, okay? That they are being labeled kind of one and the same, but actually some are really most likely Neanderthal men and women that have survived, which I'll tie into that in a second, and also actually something that is ape related as well in different areas because you have different behaviorisms. And I was just introduced again by Forrest Galanti about how the Gigantopithecus supposedly only went extinct around 11,000 years ago. Whoa, that's the same time frame supposedly the dire wolf, the Dinopithecus, the cave bear. That's nothing, man. And also from the way their jaw is, because they've been able to gather more jaw fragments and bone fragments, they're pretty sure that this was a more bipedal ape than it was quadrupedal. And they also think, just like modern day Homo erectus, how we had to change our diets when we started consuming more than just vegetables and things and meat, how our brains grew. Well, same thing, that these were being pushed out of their area, no different because Homo erectus did that with everything, right? And that these
Yeah.
Gigantopithecus had to more or less change their diets. Okay. So even though their teeth would have been set up for chewing on grass and things, well, we at one point in time, same thing, weren't really just eating meat all the time, but
Yeah.
as through history, yes. So they seem to think these Gigantopithecus were pushed off and obviously fled from Homo erectus and are in very sparse numbers now. But this also now ties into the Neanderthal thing I wanted to say, because there is a ton of credence that Neanderthals were very about consuming Homo erectus, okay? And it ties into about how when we see, pareidoia in the forest, our mind's always trained to, see something that looks like us, and we always fear things that look like us, okay? Well, these Neanderthals were, yes, coming in, taking our women and children and things, and people don't realize how strong these things were. Picture like a chimpanzee. Neanderthals were smart, but not as smart as Homo erectus. They didn't know how to use bow and arrows and such. They were so short and stocky that they couldn't really reach over the back of their heads. And from their hunting techniques, they would ambush things at close distance, like mammoths and such, and just jab the living crap out of them with spears and things. And that was the type of battle that Neanderthals did, because they were stocky and hardy, and obviously not a dwarf, but like a dwarf kind of picture like that, just these little stocky beasts. But they were so strong that they were believed to have been able to just rip off, most likely, say, our arm with very much ease. Okay. But what gave us the advantage is that we were able to learn, set traps. We had weapons that we could hit them from a distance and such. So again, we forced them off into sparse numbers. Supposedly only around 11,000 years ago, there's some interesting stuff again where supposedly some of these remnant Neanderthals were kicking around too. And if you look at some of the behaviors of the wild men in the mountains and things, doesn't necessarily fall into the line of the Gigantopithecus. It falls more into the line of Neanderthal man. So I'm starting to believe, even though pay attention to the Dogman and such, that the Bigfoot Sasquatch thing is more than just either a person or a ape. I think there's some stuff going on there. I do think there's remnants of the Gigantopithecus. I do think there are still Neanderthal primitive men and women out there, and these might be falling into the categories of what people are seeing. And also, there was a remnant of the human that was around 7 feet tall, one of our ancestors, okay? Throughout history, they just grew to that size because they had to deal with larger prey and things. And I just found that to be really interesting. And before we let you kind of go, I think that tied into some of the stuff that you speak about too, with like the missing people and how there could be a lot going on. But Neanderthals ate people, man. And what the heck? They lived up in caves and such too. So, we don't really know much about
Yeah.
caves. Yeah.
It kind of fits in with what I do because there's something about caves. There are people that have had strange experiences in or near caves that have gone missing, and even to the point of hearing something calling them from a cave, sometimes even in their own voice. I don't know about you, but if I hear me calling to me from a cave, I'm going to turn around and run the other way like hell. But there's something out there. The underground bases and things that we know of, I like to think of what's out there that we don't know of, that we haven't encountered. And who's to say, like the coelacanth that we were talking about, they thought that had been extinct for eons, yet there it is. What's to say that there aren't other creatures of that type, even some type of primitive man that's still out there? And I can take you to a place over near Fences County where there's feral chickens that live in the woods. Decades ago, there was a chicken truck. They have a lot of chicken houses over there that raise chickens to send to market. And a truck that's on, I think it's Highway 27, real curvy, windy. Truck ran off the road into a creek. All these chickens got loose, and somewhere they must have found some roosters, or they had roosters in there with them because they ran out in the woods. And to this day, brother, you can go over there and there's wild feral chickens running around in those woods that have somehow survived. I mean, chickens aren't indigenous to anything like that that I know of. They're domesticated, barnyard fowl, but there they are, and they've somehow managed to survive. So, if a chicken could do it, think of what else could do it.
Again, great stuff, man, to stir the pot. And I'm going to add a little bit more spice up in there before we let you get back to your busy schedule. But I mean, out in Washington recently, this just goes to show people, look, if people want things that are scary and real, it's out there. People don't have to dive into, all kinds of hoaxes and create hoaxes. This involves no cryptid at all, okay? This involves a person. So this guy, he does speak about it on his channel now, but at first he hadn't. So I didn't want to put him on blast, but either way, he was in Washington. He likes to camp all around, and he's out in the middle of the forest, deep in the forest by himself. He all of a sudden hears what sounds like keys rattling, and he's like, "What the heck?" He stands up, hears crunch, crunch. No one's there, obviously, because whatever it was, ducked down and such. So he's waiting, nothing. Okay, sits back down. Doesn't really feel it, but he's just like, all right, I'm all the way out here. I'm probably just potentially imagining things. No, here's crunch, crunch again. So he stands up, looks all around, still can't see, has a horrible feeling, packs up all of his stuff. Okay, and now as he's returning to his nearby truck, out of his peripheral vision, he sees immediately something that does not look like a tree or a bush. It looks like a statue or something. So he turns around, shines his light on it, and it's a person. You can't tell if it's male or female, but their back's towards them and they're decked out in full-fledged camo gear. Okay, so this dude's like thinking to himself, I don't want to say anything because what the heck? Who are these people? I'm in literally in the middle of freaking nowhere, and this dude or woman or whoever this is just was coming into my camp. And now, if I say something, they obviously know they're busted. What if they have a weapon right there, or I have really no way to defend myself? So he's just holding the flashlight on them, and he said he doesn't really know how long it was, but it seemed like quite a long time. And he backs up, and he said as he turns to put his stuff in his truck real quick and then turns back around, this person has obviously stepped into the forest now and is out of his vision. So he gets in his truck and drives away. All right, well, just recently another person informed me that they really like to hike. They spend a lot of time deep out in the forest of Washington. They've come across some, let's say, sketchy homeless encampments where nothing happened to them, but just not really positive vibes. So yeah, there's definitely a lot going on out there in the forest, whether it's cryptid based or human based. And I just always encourage people to make sure you are keeping your head on a swivel. And to tie into the chicken thing, you're going to probably have heard of this because I feel like you are a wealth of knowledge and everything I like to share with you, you're ahead of me, which is great stuff, man. Well, again, Forrest Galanti. Let's go, man. This guy's another wealth of knowledge. Okay. The thylacine, right? Tasmanian tiger. All right. We've all also heard about the El Chupacabra, correct? All right. Some interesting stuff is there was basically a slave ship for animals carrying exotic animals that were being sold on the market. Okay. And it crashed down south near Texas and all these areas where the chupacabra is. On this boat or a bunch of Tasmanian tigers. Interesting. We also have bush dogs. Okay, bush dogs are, anyone can look it up. They're very hard to catch on camera. Not saying they're that smart. I don't know. They just are sneaky little guys and girls. You also have coyotes and wolves, right? If you look at any of those now with mange, oh my goodness, do they really fit into the category of quote unquote the El Chupacabra? And the first woman to say she had seen this thing, or the goat sucker, had just got done watching the movie Species. She used that as an example to, explain what she had seen. Not saying she didn't still see something, but we all know, obviously, when you see something, your mind is now influenced by it, meaning no one knew what dinosaurs looked like, but when we first saw Jurassic Park, we automatically assumed that's what a T-Rex looked like. But that's not what the T-Rex looked like. But either way, that's what she then said she had seen. Well, over 100 of these animals were observed and looked into. None of them showed signs of blood loss. But also, what people don't realize is blood is a nutrient, okay? Meaning there used to be a stray cat that would hang around here and I would feed her all the time, but maybe some of the steak was undercooked where it was still bleeding a little bit. She loved lapping up all that stuff. And that's why animals eat soft tissues like eyeballs and such that seem disgusting to us. But those all contain nutrients. So none of those animals lost their blood, but even if they did, which they didn't, it's not uncommon for animals to lick up blood and things. And I just, again, thought that was interesting. And it kind of ties into what we were saying about how things could go feral because Tasmanian tigers in an environment down south too, they really wouldn't have that many predators, man, and could easily kind of hide around too. So I just, again, found that intriguing.
Yeah, indeed. And that's one of the most frightening things you'll ever encounter is a known animal, a furry one, a hairy one with the mange. I know I was up in Washington State one time, it's been a few years ago when I was living up there. A friend and I had went up above the snow line looking around. I was trying to find Sasquatch footprints, and I found one. But one place we drove through, there was some kind of strange animal. I just caught it out of the corner of my eye. And I'm like, what in the world was that? Had him turn the Jeep around and go back, and it was an elk with a very severe case of the mange. But if I hadn't gone back to identify that, I thought it would have been like some kind of monster or something. Same with a bear. A bear with a bad case of mange is one of the strangest, weirdest looking things you'll ever see. Just because we're used to seeing them, without that in their natural state, but they look really bizarre. So things like that happen too. But I don't think everything that people encounter out there is a bear with a mange or something with a mange. That's a possible explanation of a small part of these sightings, I think.
Great stuff again, man, and I love it because, like you said, there's definitely some other stuff going on for sure. But I do agree with you that that's gonna probably be a portion of it for sure. And yeah, things with mange look gnarly. I saw a bear that legit looked like something straight up out of a horror movie. And again, it's super interesting for sure. But it's even more interesting that there is logicalness to this and also still aspects that are unexplainable, meaning, yeah, no matter whether it's science or not, they still are kind of baffled. I mean, I have scientists I work with that can't explain some of the footprints we've have on file, can't explain some of the vocalizations because at the end of the day, even though, you and I were talking about the Ozark Howler and the men doing those cool sounding howls, that could still be told it was coming from a human voice track this day and age very easily. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
if we can't figure out what this animal is, and by sending it to specialists and such, they would tell us, hey, look, this sounds like a person, okay? Or this vocal range is within a person. But their response is, this vocal range is within no sort of animal range that
yeah,
we know of. Like there's a gentleman up in our area in New York, man, ironically, because there's a lot of sightings that involve dogmen or werewolves or with people smoking cigarettes and cigars. Well, seemingly every time this dude would go outside, he would end up getting these strange howling type things that sound canine-ish, but do not sound like something that should be up here in New England. And it's still kind of got our science team stumped. So that's why, like you said, it's super important to be dancing inside and outside of the box and not just be so stuck in the one mind perspective because again, as a journalist, I always preach this. Sure, you are supposed to have an opinion, but you're not supposed to enunciate your opinion unless you're asked. Your job is to gather information and figure out where it belongs. And if you're a good journalist, you form your opinions and hypotheses and theories off of the proper evidence that's being presented to you. And it's also not for me to just always go in, just believing things. I go in with a very healthy dose of skepticism and just reality first and just try to listen and learn. And like you said, I guess I kind of sound like your dad. I've never had any sort of paranormal activity, anything. All right. I've had a couple run-ins with some psychotic individuals that luckily nothing panned out poorly for me, but those were humans. Okay. But that doesn't mean just because we haven't, experienced something that it can't be occurring because again, like your dad said, I'm not a scientist, but there's things that I can relate to where he says like the anomalies and such. Well, there's just things that don't add up, and people have been able to pass lie detectors. And but again, we can talk about that another time. There's been people that are liars that pass those, vice versa. But whatever, just super credible stuff like the footprints and things. And like your dad would
Yeah,
say, these just don't add up to the science side of it fully. I mean, it does science wise because it's there, but if these things don't exist, then where is this footprint coming from, you know?
yeah. And that's the thing. You can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. Facts is facts, as the saying goes. But if you go into it, even with the most hard science, if you keep an open mind and realize that those are just constraints that you're putting on there that may not fit, your mileage may vary, as they used to say.
Again, beautifully stated, my friend, and thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. It's been
Oh, my pleasure.
yeah, it's been awesome, dude. I always look forward to being able to collaborate with you because you always have some really interesting, great knowledge and a very amazing mindset. And as previously stated, you were always somebody that I followed interest in, and it's super cool now to be able to sit down with you and call you my friend and reach out to you and
Indeed.
stuff because, like I said, I just always found you very intriguing with knowledge. So keep up the great work, man, and I definitely look forward to helping you out and collaborating as much as possible, bro.
I appreciate that, and I'd like to have you on my radio show soon. And otherwise, I'll see you a little further on down the trail. You take good care of yourself and be kind to each other.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share it. Feed the algorithm, and I will catch you very soon.